She was shit-faced. There was tons of drugs. More details of Lord of the Flies party emerge. Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. We're now at day 7 of Kylie Rodney's disappearance. Today's Friday. A week ago, late Friday night last week, Kylie disappeared. We know now that the party swelled to about 300 people and that there were older men present of 27, 28 years old, almost twice Kylie's age, and they were supplying minors with lines of cocaine and mushrooms. We also know that Kylie was stumbling around going from group to group, which means if someone was there with ill intent, he would have likely seen her and taken advantage, perhaps taken a vehicle as well. So I think it's time now for a couple of scenarios, and obviously this is speculation, that have now become possible, even plausible. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment. If you're enjoying the content, you are welcome to hit the thanks button. And let's get started. So the first scenario is number 1, the watery grave. In this scenario, Kylie simply drove off the road and into the lake somewhere. On the surface, this appears the most likely scenario, but each day that passes without the vehicle being found seems to suggest something more ominous and less innocent occurred. Now let's deal with the Lord of the Flies scenario A. It could have started with a fairly innocent scenario involving one or several boys that just could have spun out of control. An inexperienced 16-year-old taking in a toxic combination of substances, alcohol, shrooms, coke, and whatnot, and then there's an adverse reaction. If this happened, someone may have wanted not only to cover his tracks, but make it seem like Kylie had been able to leave the party. You know, if her car leaves, then she's left as well. And thus there hasn't been a crime. And thus the crime scene of her disappearance is somewhere else. Then, Lord of the Flies scenario B. In this scenario, some of the men present are nefarious, possibly full-time drug dealers, so not good, innocent, nice guys. In this scenario, the motive may have been greed, with Kylie targeted for her spiffy vehicle, or Kylie was targeted and the vehicle taken as well. The reason the Lord of the Flies scenarios are worth thinking about is thanks to a tipster called Ronnie Jones, whose 2 cousins who attend Sierra College apparently went to the party. And according to what these cousins told Jones, we're getting a much clearer idea of what was going on at that party. And what they said to Jones is now since been quoted by The Sun in America. And this is a quote from the article. Quote, and they had some other friends going with them, but they were around 27, 28 years old. They're older. There was a lot of older dudes there. And so I asked them if they knew her, and they said they saw her. They saw her there and that she was just like, laughing, going from group to group, talking. They didn't make nothing of it. But she was talking to, I guess, a bunch of people. She was just walking around talking to everybody. And they said at the party a lot of people were doing shrooms, cocaine, drinking and all that. And I was like, yeah, but that's kind of normal around here though. I wasn't really surprised about that. I asked them, Ronnie asked, did you see anything weird going on? Was anyone looking at her funny? But they responded, no, everyone was just chill. But everyone was kind of messed up and so was she. And then he said, how drunk was she? And they said, well, she was stumbling around. She wasn't walking around. She was pretty drunk. If she had been driving around, she would have been swerving easily. There was no way she could have driven. And so that's also a possible pretext for what happened, is that possibly she asked for someone to drive her or someone offered, and that is how that person got access to both her and her vehicle. Now, something else that's quite interesting from the article, quite curious and I guess quite cryptic, is that the cousins said there was some other stuff that they can't really talk about. And so obviously that's the stuff we want to know about. But they kind of emphasized she was really drunk and there was tons of drugs in their words, not just drinking. And that they were doing blow, that's cocaine, openly. They went on to emphasize it wasn't just a teen party. There were a lot of adults there, mid-20s, guys that were a lot older than 18. According to the article, quote, Ronnie claimed his family didn't see her leave and left the party around 10:30 or 11 p.m., while Kylie continued to party until, I think, an hour and a half later, 12:30 a.m. Saturday morning. Something else that's quite interesting from these witnesses is the fact that they don't remember seeing her wearing the hoodie. She wasn't seen wearing a sweatshirt at the time. Apparently she was wearing a bodysuit, but they didn't see her wearing the sweatshirt or the hoodie. Now, that may suggest that at some point she'd removed some of her clothes, or someone else had removed some of her clothes. From the above image, it looks like it was quite chilly out. Although there are a few that are wearing t-shirts, most have sweaters and long trousers. You can also see at the bottom left is what appears to be a bag. I first thought it could be an item of clothing, but I think it's more likely plastic with a bottle slightly to the left of it. And then you can also see alcohol bottles, especially in the center of the image. Going back to the article, quote, when kids go out there, I've been out there, they don't go out there with the drugs. They don't go out there with the shrooms. They bring the alcohol. And so he goes on to say that it's the dudes, these other guys, these older guys, who bring the drugs, and then the younger kids hang out with the group, the older guys, because they're giving them the blow. These are his words. And then hooking them up with stuff they can't really afford. So what's kind of happening is the younger people are going there and they are hooking up or getting hooked up with older people who've got more money. And that is how the sort of transaction takes place. He sort of makes the point to say these young people can't really afford cocaine because it's pretty expensive. Then he goes on to say, quote, most of the guys, they always want to give it to the girls. They give them free lines, but then they want you to kick it with them like, hey, come do a line with me, come do a line with me. That's how it goes. That's how those parties are. Then he also says, quote, there's no telling what could have happened, but I do know she was messed up. That's a fact. So if they tried to word it nicely, no, she was shit-faced, end quote. Now, the unfortunate thing about Ronnie Jones's version of events is it's second or third hand. My repeating it makes it essentially third or fourth hand. You really want to get a first-hand narrative, but of course anyone who volunteers information feels like they are raising their hands, putting their hands up, asking to get into trouble or get someone else into trouble, or have their parents say, oh, is that what's going on? You're definitely not going to another party. And no one wants that, and no one wants to be the rat. So Ronnie goes on to also say, I can't say for sure she participated in substances, but that's what was there for a fact. And then there's also speculation that was there something in that cocaine? Was there some other substance that may have been a dangerous combination? Something else that came out in this whole discussion with his cousins is that this party, news of this party came out well in advance, that word actually got out about this end of school party as long as a month ahead of time. And I think you probably have a lot of adults looking in on the situation quite severely and sort of with a lot of judgment. But I think you've also got to bear in mind these kids are coming through the pandemic. We didn't go through the pandemic when we were, at school or university. These kids have a much stronger need to just relax and to socialize, right? And to just de-stress. And so one can kind of ask, how old was Kylie when the pandemic hit? And I think the answer is she was either 13 or 14 years old. And so you can imagine her whole life, in a way, certainly her social life, has been put on hold for essentially the last 2 to 3 years. And so you can imagine you want to party, you want to have a good time, given that whole desert of interactions, right? So this guy, who's 29 years old, he believes that it makes sense to start by looking at who Kylie was hanging out with, right? And the other thing that is quite insightful from him is he says everyone there were in groups. You didn't really have anyone coming there as individuals. They were all part of groups. And so you really just want to know which groups was she in towards the end of the evening. So obviously, if everyone left in a group, didn't Kylie as well? So who was that group? Find the group, find the car they left in, and maybe Kylie and her vehicle will be found as well. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.